Welcome. On today's episode of the MP Podcast, we have Matt Heinz. Matt is the founder and president of Heinz Marketing. He's also the host of the Sales Pipeline Radio Podcast and a bunch of other things, which I'll leave for him to tell us about. But for those of you who don't know Matt, I consider Matt to be a true B2B go-to-market expert. He's seen it all. He's seen the evolution of B2B sales and marketing. So, Matt, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. You and I have known each other, I would say peripherally, if you would, for many, many years.
Yes.
Maybe even back from my days at Eloqua. I was trying to trace it back, certainly while I was at Triblio. But so, love to hear about your journey. Tell us about your journey. What led you to get into marketing? What led you to start Heinz Marketing? Love to hear that.
Yeah, Andre, well, first, thanks for having me. This is a pleasure. In terms of my journey, this has all been a giant mistake, truly. I studied journalism and political science at the University of Washington with the intent of being a reporter. Woodward and Bernstein were kind of my journalistic heroes. I wanted to go and do investigative journalism. And my first job out of school, I was a reporter for a suburban Seattle newspaper, working in the state government, covering state government. Ended up not loving it for a variety of reasons. Ended up at a PR firm for a while, then ended up at Microsoft for a while. That's where I really started doing sort of broader sort of marketing and B2B especially, and then ran marketing in a couple startups before a little over 16 years ago decided to quit my job. So picture this, right? It's November 2008. The market had just tanked. My wife is finally pregnant with our first child. So why not? Let's quit your job. You don't need a job. You don't need a salary. You don't need benefits. It sounds worse now than it was, but I just decided to it was just me, a laptop, and a bus pass, and just grown from there. So I feel very humbled and blessed by the journey overall, but definitely sort of a lesson in serendipity, right? And sort of like being open to new ideas that weren't necessarily part of the plan.
I just can't imagine many younger professionals hearing this would be encouraged by that, because I think the present time that we're in is a time of flux, is the best way I can describe it, right?
Yeah.
No one knows how it's going to turn out. No one knows how long before things settle in, but certainly a lot of uncertainty. So I think that's encouraging to hear that from you.
Well, and I would say for whether you're just out of school, whether you're like me, sort of middle-aged and trying to figure out where you go, a couple things. One, Pascal Finette, who's sort of a futurist, talks about this innovation paradox. And he says that the innovation that has happened in the past appears far more normal than it actually was. The innovation curve, which was far steeper than we now see or perceive it to be. The innovation in the future that we don't know about appears far steeper than it will feel as we go through it. Our lizard brains are pretty good about renormalizing to whatever the current conditions are. So that's one thing. Two, life is written in pencil, man. I mean, there's a lot of things that we go and decisions we made that are important, but they're not permanent. And I think that's important to remember as we go through life and sort of make decisions about what we want to do next.
So, but besides your firm, you also host the Sales Pipeline Radio Podcast. You have another podcast I think you do with Brent Adamson. You, from what I understand from previous conversations, you also host the CMO community with over 3,000. So first of all, when do you find time to sleep?
Well, I'm very fortunate that we have a fantastic team at Heinz Marketing that, helps keep the lights on, that, we've got just a world-class client services team that just, does great work. And part of my job now is content, right? It's to take, the 16 plus years of having done this, countless client conversations, daily conversations with CMOs and B2B go-to-market professionals, and kind of distill that into what's going on. And what do we need to be thinking about and working on? And so, between the podcast and the CMO community, it's great formats to be able to share and learn, and hopefully continue to provide value back to those that are watching and listening.
That's great, thank you. And then when people are, when firms are hiring you, what's the gamut? What's the range of services? What are you doing for them? What job are they hiring you for?
Yeah, it's really about building more predictable pipeline. I think most companies that come to us, having done random acts of marketing and sales, and there's lumpiness in pipeline for a lot of internal and external reasons. One of the biggest drivers is just the complexity of the buying process right now. It's longer. It's more fraught with bottlenecks. There's more people involved than ever. So orchestrating that work together in an integrated go-to-market motion that makes the most efficient use of your team and resources, but also drives predictable, repeatable, scalable pipeline. That's important. And you can't do that just by buying more ads or throwing more things at your prospects. You really got to have a better strategy, process, and playbook for how you're going to go to market as an advanced marketing team, but also as a combined go-to-market team across sales, marketing, and even customer success. So the more complex, the better for us, because our teams. Go ahead.
So you're dealing with mostly large companies with complex organizations, complex processes, those kinds of
Not
things.
always large companies. Like you can be a small company, but still have, a 9-12 month sales process with 8 people involved where you have to help them reach consensus and a commitment to change. So the size of the company is less important than the nature of what you're selling and how complex that buying journey is.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. Before we get into, which is why I wanted you on this podcast, because, this podcast I started because I feel like prospecting and building pipeline is in flux, and I want to just talk to experts. But before I leave that, I got to ask you this question. What's with your obsession with barbecue?
I wouldn't characterize it as an obsession. We all need things that we get excited about. Smoked meat happens to be on that list for me. So, all in moderation, Andre.
Yes.
Like I don't do it all the time, but I just think it's delicious. And there's something to be said for taking a hunk of protein and doing something transformational with it.
Yeah.
Especially again, like sometimes it's hours, if not days, if not weeks of a process of brining or whatever else you're doing. It's just fun. It's just enjoyable.
No, I only have Justin. No, it's really you're not going to get any argument from me. I'm a meat lover. So in fact, it was my backdoor way of saying I understand you have something that you host these meetups.
Yes.
And a bunch of, how do I get on that list is all I'm saying.
Yeah, you're welcome anytime. Meetup spelled MEAT
yes,
up.
Of course.
This year we did our second annual meetup in Austin, Texas, and it literally we had about 45 CMOs that came in from Friday lunch till Sunday lunch.
Love it.
We just, between Austin and Lockhart and, a couple places to have a beverage along the way, it was a lot of fun. What you got to remember, though, when you do that, though, is you have to drink a lot of water.
Yeah.
A lot of water. Very important.
Hydration.
Yes, sir.
All right, let's jump into the topic of building pipeline. You're an entrepreneur. You built and you run a really successful boutique consulting company. How do you prospect? How do you build pipeline?
Well, the two things that I think have been really important for me are consistency and value. Consistency meaning you got to do it every day. I think one of the things that really people that want to put up their own shingle and do their own thing, whether it's just them or a small group of people, prospecting has to be a daily practice. I mean, daily practice. You got to do it all the time. And some people don't want to, some people don't like to, some people don't. But if you don't do it on a daily basis, your pipeline is going to dwindle. Right? Yeah. It literally will. I think the other piece, so consistency is one, value is the other. And what I mean by that is, I can prospect, but when I prospect, I'm not selling. What do I have to give you? What do I have of value that will help you be better today? Right? And so the idea is just to be in front of people with, this is kind of a dorky term, but value deposits, right? Yeah. Like you're continuing to build value for people so that when they have a need, they're coming to you first.
Yeah.
So it's important that they know who you are. It's important that they know what you do, but it's important to be in front of them early and often. And so, I got a number I got to hit this quarter, but I plan on being in business for a while. And so sometimes you're working on an opportunity for years. I've had plenty of customers that, do projects with us that I met them at a previous company or 2 or 3 companies ago when the conditions just weren't right for them to sort of bring us in, but you build value, you make a difference for them. You do those value deposits, and over time that turns into pipeline as well. You can't just hope that it's all going to work out, that the phone's going to ring the right number of times every quarter. So combining consistent prospecting with consistently creating value, that's it. That's in, the manifestation or the podcast and everything else, but like, that's it.
I think there's so much to be said to what you're saying that's quite profound, actually, because I think when we think of prospecting, or a lot of people, when they think about prospecting, they think of it in very transactional terms.
Yeah.
I do X, by over the next 2 weeks, I expect Y to, and what you're saying is, look, you're sowing seeds. Some of those seeds will bloom in the near term. Some of them will become a big oak tree in a couple of years, right?
Yeah.
So
I'll give you a couple examples of what I mean by this. One is if someone's new if they just took a CMO job, like they've either first time CMO or maybe they're fifth time CMO, but they just got a new job. I have a outbound sequence I put them on that sort of is drip emails with like, hey, here's a 30, 60, 90-day template that another CMO used, or here's some early board slides, examples that someone else found valuable. And at some point in that sequence, it triggers me to make an outbound phone call. I'm not calling to sell them anything. I'm not calling, hey, when can you hire us? But it's more of a, hey, checking in, just hope the new job's going well. Yeah. Always curious what, expectations going in, how that maps to, the surprises and skeletons that you see on the ground. But would you love to check in? And if there's anything else I can share with you, happy to do it. Value. Right. Yes. And so we get pipeline from that conversation, but it's not by asking for pipeline. That's one. Two, we have a metric on our executive scorecard. So it's a weekly number we look at as a leadership team that is target accounts engaged. Right. Mm-hmm. So I have a sales number I need to hit this quarter. I have a pipeline created number I need to hit this quarter. Target accounts engaged means how many people from companies in our ICP were engaged with our content last week. Maybe they were in a newsletter, maybe they went to our podcast, maybe they were on the blog, something. But I have a minimum number of target account contacts engaged I want to hit every week. And if I hit that number consistently, that is future pipeline.
Yeah.
Right? So I've got one metric that says, how am I doing this quarter? I've got pipeline created number that helps me understand how well I'm set up for next quarter. And then I've got target accounts engaged that shows me 2+ quarters in advance, whether I'm doing the right work now to get there. So I bring that up because you mentioned, well, there's metrics behind this, right? Yeah. But I think that doesn't mean you're calling asking for business. It means you're calling to give value.
Yeah. Yeah. Selling is helping, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, I'm not sure you would agree with this, but it just feels to me, to a lot of people I speak with, that building pipeline effectively and consistently seems more difficult than ever before. I mean, that's now, it's never been something easy, but it's just felt in the last few years, it's become more and more difficult. What's changed? I mean, or would you agree, I guess, maybe?
I would agree. I would agree with a couple caveats. I think, if you're trying to find people that need what you're selling right now, it's hard to do that, right? Like, in any given market, only 2 to 3% of your prospects, 2 to 3% of the market is actively buying. Mm-hmm. So you got to make 100 phone calls and then to find the 2 or 3 people that are actively buying, and they have a lot of different options, right? And so if they don't know who you are, they may be talking to other people. So your conversion rate on those 2 to 3 is very small. So the numbers work against you to begin with if you need that business right now. The other thing working against you is the volume of noise out there. Mm-hmm. I had a CMO show me, she kept track of a chart. She said, like, here's the amount of spam I used to get from sellers. And then ChatGPT comes out, and you can see when the AI tool started to launch, because the volume she's getting is exponentially higher. So we get all excited, Andre, when we say, like, AI is making it faster, cheaper, easier for me to prospect and get messages out. That solves a seller problem, and it creates a problem for the buyers. And it's not working for either of them, right? Yeah. So I think it's a combination of just the nature of how many people are in market at any given time and finding those people in the moment, combined with just how hard it is to get and earn someone's attention right now. And that noise level is only getting worse.
Yeah, I agree. I love the phrase, earn someone's attention, because you really do have to earn it today. So agree with you. So when you think about the future of outbound, are you of the camp, hey, you know what? There's going to be a big, massive shift. Outbound doesn't work anymore simply because of the noise. Where do you land on that?
Oh no, outbound works. I mean, look, if you're sending a cold email to a cold contact who doesn't know you, I don't care how well written that email is. It's going to sit in their inbox with everything else, and if they don't know who you are, then they're probably not going to respond, right? So outbound has always been difficult. I could argue it's harder now, but you can never expect it to work immediately. Right? I mean, like, it's kind of like driving by someone's house at 35 miles an hour and trying to throw something in the mailbox.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to miss most of the time, and sometimes you might get something that flies in. But then, I don't know about you, but like, I'm working from home today. We're doing this from my little, sunken basement, and you got to walk about 100 feet down a gravel drive to get to my mailbox. Right? So I'll go down once a day and I'll open the mailbox and I got a bunch of stuff. And literally on the walk back up the drive, I am separating out the recycling. So someone spent a lot of time and effort to make that postcard or to send me that mail, and most of it doesn't even get in the house.
Yeah.
So this analogy works really well for me from an outbound standpoint, because it means like things aren't even showing up. But if you keep doing it, and if you keep doing it and just try to sell me something, it's always going in the recycle bin, right? But if you have something interesting, eventually I'm going to notice that. If you have something valuable for me, eventually I'm going to recognize that. The next time something shows up in my mailbox from you, I'm a little more likely to bring it in the house.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm a little more likely to recognize your car when you drive by and say, oh, Matt just drove by. Maybe there's something good in the mailbox. Maybe I should go check the mailbox now, right? And I don't mean any of this in a stalker way. But what I mean is that to create differentiation with outbound, it takes time and discipline. Yeah. And that is an inconvenient truth for a lot of sellers that want that instant gratification of building pipeline.
It's so interesting on two counts from my perspective. One is I use the same mailbox analogy just all the time. It's like I say, well, you may have written me a really lovely note, but I might never see it if I have 1,000 pieces of mail to sort through, right? Sometimes just out of sheer volume, you miss all the good pitches. But the other thing that's really interesting that you didn't call out explicitly, but you alluded to, is relationships matter, right? So consistency, finding opportunities to connect with people, that actually does matter. So
it really does. It really does. And our someday there may be a robot selling a robot's world, maybe.
Hope not.
But until then, our lizard brains want to talk to other lizard brains. Yeah. Even those of us that are introverted and socially anxious and whatnot, like, we want that relationship. We want that closeness with someone else. And when you become someone that people enjoy spending time with, when you become someone that people value your information, like if you're selling to someone and you have a first call with someone, one of your objectives should be for, at the end of that call, for end of that Zoom, for someone to lean back in their chair and say, wow, that's good. I would have paid for that. I would have paid for that insight. I would have paid for that information. What's something you can share with them that not only can they not unlearn, but also just makes them a little better, a little smarter along the way.
That is so good.
I guarantee you, your 22-year-old SDRs can do that. People say, well, you got to be in our industry for 400 years, or you got to whatever. No. Teach your sales team how to ask better questions. Teach your sales team not to ask the prospect what keeps them up at night, but tell them what should be keeping them up at night that they may or may not be thinking about yet. Yeah. Give them some insights. Like, they're not going to expect your 22-year-old to be, a PhD expert in the topic. You can still build value. You can still create value.
Yeah, that's so good. In fact, I mean, it's a reminder for all of us, right? Not just the 22-year-old SDR. So if I'm a revenue leader and I'm struggling to build qualified pipeline consistently, what are the 3 to 4 or 5 diagnostic questions that I should be sort of asking myself to sort of figure out where the problem is or what the problem might be?
Yeah, there's a couple foundational things that if they're not right, your house is built on sand. One of them is, who am I selling to and why? And if you tell me, well, we sell to companies in healthcare, I'm going to say that's way too wide. Right? What's the subset of the market that you should be selling to today? What's the criteria for those organizations that makes them more likely to buy? Do you have that documented and followed by all? I will have all the time I'll ask people like, who do you sell to? And they'll give me a decent answer. And I'll say, great, can you send that to me? Can you send me where you, no, we don't have it. Everyone knows that. Like, no. If it's not written down, I guarantee you it is being interpreted differently by different people in the organization. So one is start with the companies you should be selling to and why. Two, make sure you are multi-threading those conversations. Can't tell you how many times you got a target company and we got the one person. Like there's a book called Selling to Veto, and Veto is an acronym. It's called Very Important Top Officer. Doesn't work. You can't, in today's buying environment, go to just that one person. You have to be talking to multiple decision makers and influencers in the deal. So talking to the right company and engaging with multiple people in the process is critical. Your deal will go nowhere unless you help that internal team build consensus towards a commitment to change. It is the hardest and most important part of the deal. And you can do all of that without even talking about your product. You're not selling a product, you're selling an outcome. Your product is the enabler of that outcome. The outcome is what people have to commit to. And so getting that going is critically important. And that's the third one, right? So one is having the right set of target accounts. Two, having the right understanding and engagement with multiple members of the buying committee. And three, knowing what motivates them to get to that commitment to change individually and as a group. That is foundational. Now, how you do that, field events, emails, AI, that's the how, right? But if you don't figure out the why and the what first, you're just it's just a lot of busy work.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, but and since we've already mentioned AI a couple of times, we got to jump into that topic.
Sure.
Let's talk about AI and go to market. I just got back from SaaStr recently, actually last week. At the time of recording was last week, and let me just say, the topic was AI all day. I mean, it was the AI hype squad out, in mass. Every session, if you're not using AI, if you're not leveraging AI for customer service, and I would say in particular, they were hyping up automated AI SDRs, right? It was like, if you're not using these automated AI SDRs, you're behind. So I'll get into sort of my point of view with Tiga, but your perspective on these automated AI SDRs tools, just for clarity, I'm talking about tools like 11x, Artisan, I think is another vendor of that ilk, where they have digital identities at times and they'll basically prospect automatically, with no human intervention. What's your perspective on those tools?
Well, I mean, depending on when you actually listen to this, the technology might be wildly different than it is today. I think based on today's technology, if you're not using AI agents to automate at least part of your SDR process, you're probably falling a little behind. And I think that the biggest separation to me right now is inbound versus outbound. The inbound, if someone comes to you and they show some interest, your ability to sort of qualify, triage, and sort of set up the next step at an appointment, for anyone who is inbound appointment setting, that can be automated now.
Agreed.
So that's something you definitely should be automating. I think that, if you look at sort of what, we used to just send emails and just hope people respond. And then we had tools like SalesLoft and Outreach that could at least put them into a reasonable sequence and show us when people engage with things. And now we have tools, and I'm selfishly, we use Tiga AI ourselves. And now we can be intelligent about the triggers that to sort of start someone, or we can be intelligent about multi-channels and engaging with them there. It is an incredible advantage to be able to use those tools for prospecting. I don't believe we're at the point where it can be self-sufficient. Again, the technology is improving, and the ability for AI to replicate a human in the process is good. But it doesn't. I still think is for senior decision makers making big decisions, having a human to be able to engage on that is still fairly unique. And again, that may change, but I think that it's clear that the tools available already are helping some companies be far more effective, far more efficient.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think our point of view has always been, B2B selling the way we know it today, the way it's been practiced. And I think in the foreseeable near term, it's human to human, right? Like you said, there may be a day where bots are talking to bots, but not today, and hopefully not in the next 10 years. But it's human to human. So for our own perspective is we're building an AI agent to amplify human-centric selling, right? So it's not trying to take a. I think those fully automated tools, one challenge I think it poses is, for the most part, if you are selling in a human-to-human way, there seems to be something a little bit defrauding to that relationship. If I feel like as a seller, I'm optimizing, I'm not even spending, actual time, human time with you, but I'm expecting you to spend your
Right.
precious time with that. It's just, there's an asymmetry there that I suspect doesn't work for a long term.
Well, we've seen this arc already happen in customer success, in customer service, right? Hey, why do we have people on the phone when we can just give people access to a wiki? Why don't we just have them type in their answer and have them help with that way? Or you know what? Get rid of the phone number and just put up a chatbot, and the chatbot will take care of everything. There's been cases where that works, right? Where like instead of waiting for an hour for someone finally to get to me in the queue, I can just go to a chatbot and it happens a lot faster. Yes. But it's a mixed bag in terms of feedback. There's a lot of people I just want to talk to a human. I want to get right to the quick of what I'm doing. And there is that feeling that, boy, I must be at the discount, service provider if I can't ever really talk to a person, if I have to sort of wade through this. And again, the technology will improve. It'll get more efficient and more effective at delivering something to us. But I think there's some lessons in what we've seen in terms of customer support and the automation of access to information and customer support that has not always gone well.
Yeah.
And I think you brought up a really good point as well. Again, humans with lizard brains, if a company says I can be more efficient selling by making everything digital, does that increase the noise level for the prospect? And does it actually create value for the prospect?
Yeah.
And is it, I think there's something to be said for those long sales cycles where a significant part of it, people don't want to talk to a seller, but they're learning, right? And so that building that value over time, AI agents can do that as well. But I think those long, complex sales cycles are more nuanced than just flipping on a tool and having an agent go out and engage for you.
So I'm kind of curious, in light of that, what are some use cases that you've seen across, your CMO community, across your own personal your clients, your own personal use? What are some of the use cases that revenue leaders are actually getting juice from AI?
Oh man, I think the ability to parse a significant amount of information for what you really need, right? The world has always been, you think of it as the greatest library in the world, where all the books are on the floor, and AI just makes it so much faster and easier to find the one sentence in the one book that might be somewhere that you've never seen before, and then make sense of that. And the other thing is to be able to take different data points and not just point them out to you, but synthesize that data and say, like, based on these 4 things, we're interpreting that this is about to happen, and then you can follow up based on that. So there's, the age-old question and challenge for salespeople is like, who do I call next and what do I talk about? Yeah. Instead of guessing, instead of spending a lot of time trying to do that triangulation yourself, AI is going to give you an instant answer, and we're on that path already. The other challenge I think a lot of salespeople have is, you spend 30, 40 minutes researching a target account to leave a 30-second voicemail, and you've got this long manual process of trying to figure out, what to say and learn a little bit about them. AI makes that instant. Right? It makes it instant. You can instantly learn what you need to know. You can instantly have sort of a buddy that gives you feedback. Our team already is using AI to say, like, how should I say this to the prospect? How should I answer this objection? But it's you get an email, you can do that. I've seen tools now where you can do that in real time. It's listening to the call. It's listening to what the prospect says, and there's a sidebar that only you see that is AI giving you prompts on what you should say next or how to answer that question. It's incredible to see what kind of advantage it gives. And I think to your point previously, how do we leverage AI to increase the human nature of engagement in selling, in customer service, in customer success? That's the place I'm focused a lot on, because I think that's where we see the real win-win.
For on our side, one of the things, and it goes back to the thing you were saying earlier, only 3% of your TAM is actually in market for your solution. So the question for us is always, how can we leverage AI to find buyer signals that matter to your business? What we call custom buying signals.
Yeah.
And I think that's a place that AI can really shine, because the ability to actually just consume a lot of textual information, be able to pull out of narratives that key phrase that tells you this is the optimal account or this is the optimal time to reach out is what we've seen people get a lot of juice from. So
I agree.
Notice in sort of my travels, a lot of companies are AI curious, I would say, is how I phrase it. Not, they're confused about how to get started. Like, I know this is not the only thing you do, but what advice could you offer to how to get started with AI?
Yeah, a couple things. One, you just got to get in and start using it. I spent a day, did this months ago, right, a year ago, but got the Chat GPT, go get an account, spend the $20. It's going to be the best money you ever spend. And just every question you have, every thought you have, throw it in there and say hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? How would your perspective on this? If nothing else, create a digital twin for yourself. And that you can constantly sort of ask questions and ping ideas by and sort of say, how would you say this differently? I also think if you look across your day and you think of all the things that are on your to-do list, assume that AI can do every one of those for you today. And it won't, right? But the percent of it that it can do is going to get better and better over time. If you got to write an email back to someone, but you don't know how to do it, ask AI for help. At the end of a Zoom meeting, if at the end of the Zoom meeting you have a summary, the companion summary, say take this summary and help me write a follow-up email instead of having to sit and do it yourself. And it won't be perfect, but it'll be a starting point that you can edit and get out and get done more quickly. And the more of those things you start to see, and I'm not even talking about sort of integrating this into go-to-market motions, right? Or we have a lot of companies that are redoing their org charts and creating accountability and responsibility charts where humans and robots are splitting up the work to be done. That's happening today across numerous go-to-market functions. But for you to yourself get comfortable with this, you got to get it and use it, because it'll stay intimidating if you don't. Yeah,
it's interesting because. One of the things that I did get out of SaaStr that I thought was really interesting was, I think it was Jason Lemkin. He said, he was quoting where he said, the organizations that are most successful with using AI are usually because the CRO is personally involved. The CRO is actively involved in using the tools. And I thought that was really interesting. If it's completely, it's just an observation, so don't know if it's universally true, but I think there's a lot to say. I think that speaks to where things are at today, which is there are no experts, out there, or very few. If you actually want to apply this, you got to start using it. You can start with ChatGPT, progress to other tools, get an understanding. It's not the thing that you should be just keeping a distance from, and just it shows up as a bullet point in your strategy. I mean, as a revenue leader, you actually have to get your hands a little bit dirty and use it.
Well, who was the CEO? Was it the Travelocity CEO who kind of made headlines, fairly recently, saying anyone who wants to hire someone new needs to prove to me first that AI can't do it? And he was kind of. I mean, he kind of did it in a very sort of Silicon Valley CEO kind of way. Say that what you want, but you're not wrong. Right? Because I think we're definitely at a point where whether it's a new task or a new function or a new job you need hired. I mean, I've seen a lot of people the SDR team, let's redeploy our SDRs to more outbound. Let's have the robots do inbound. But the new tools can allow us to not have to replace as many SDRs, right? Having fewer SDRs that are more productive and generating as much, if not more, pipeline by using tools. I'm seeing companies do the same thing with content development, with content production. You can't eliminate people, but there are certainly jobs and functions within that can be a shared function to get it done moving forward. Still going to cost you money. There's a company We last Friday at our CMO Coffee Talk community, we had a presentation from a company that's really radically changed how AI is integrated with their workflow. They're paying $5,000 a month to those tools to get it done, right? So it's not like, oh, there's these free tools you can go and use, or like, oh, I give everybody $20 a month ChatGPT. No, there's real money you're going to spend on this. But if you can get better output, if you can get more efficient output and more efficient use of the resources and help your people that are around be more successful and productive, it's definitely worth it.
So if you won't mind expanding on that, any thoughts on sort of the future of sales and marketing organizations in this age of AI? Project 3 to 5 years out, will there still be content marketing function? Will there be SDRs? Will there be marketing ops? And if there are, how might the roles evolve, right? Or the size of the organizations?
We're always going to need strategists. We're always going to need people that are able to look at current conditions and project into the future. AI is great at recognizing current and past, not so great at current and future. So we're going to need people that can still guide and direct where we're going to go. Are you going to need an army of copywriters? Are you going to need an army of SDRs the way we have in the past? No. We don't have typing pools in offices anymore. My first job at the PR firm was creating briefing books for clients going out on press tours. Like, you don't need an intern doing those briefing books anymore, right? Yeah. So like it's sometimes hard to envision what's going to be in the future. But, something that I think a lot about is when I was in college, there was no internet. There were really no cell phones. There was no cloud computing. And so all of those innovations happened, and they're not just innovations, they're economies. Every one of those is an economy that's created jobs and created opportunity and created wealth. AI is doing that today. Whatever comes after AI is going to do that as well. Yeah. It's really difficult to see what that's going to look like. Yeah. But the people that managed typing pools in the past saw that job go away, but a ton of new opportunity come as well. It's scary. Let's admit it. It's scary. Not knowing what that's going to look like. But I have great hope for our ability to persist and really thrive in what's to come.
Yeah, back to where we started, right? This is where you were talking about the start of your career, and I think things are really in flux right now. I think if you're a young person, it's challenging to figure out.
But they've always been in flux, when I was in school, I remember when I was a freshman at UW, they said, hey, do you want an email address? And my first reaction was like, what for? what am I going to use email for? Right. So the world that doesn't exist is very difficult, if not impossible, to wrap our brains around. Yeah. But once it exists, it's amazing how quickly we form perspectives on it and sort of integrate and operationalize it in our lives, work and beyond. Yeah.
Well, it's great. I thank you for all of that. I wanted to end talking about something a little more personal and around kind of work-life balance as a revenue leader, as a founder. A lot of revenue leaders. You yourself are a founder and a revenue leader. A couple of years ago, I noticed you started posting something around JOMO, J-O-M-O. If I've got this wrong, tell me. But and I think you defined it as the joy of missing out.
That's right.
For those who didn't see those posts, because I think it's been a while. For those who didn't see those posts, why don't you tell us what JOMO is all about? What's JOMO?
Well, it was born out of just, FOMO, which we feel, right, is, the fear of missing out. And, you have strategy is choosing, right? And sometimes it's choosing where you spend your day. Sometimes it's choosing sort of what your next job's going to be. Sometimes it's choosing what you're going to pursue and what you're not going to pursue. And I had a great a coach for a number of years, and one of the simplest things she taught me that's just foundational is that, you have to say no to things to be able to say yes to things. And by saying yes to some things, you're also saying no to others. You can't say yes to everything. And I think younger Matt, more anxious Matt, was really afraid of missing things and just figured the more at-bats I get, the better I'm going to be. And now the older I get and the more mistakes I make, the more I realize, like, I have to be far more picky about where I spend my time. I have to accept that it's not always going to work out the way I want. But I also need to be very intentional about how and where I want to spend my time, right? And so I'm traveling less. And by traveling less, I'm missing business opportunities. Like I wasn't at SaaStr.
Yeah.
If I would have been there, I might have gotten a prospect or two, right?
Yeah.
And so you miss that. But by missing SaaStr, I was able to be home.
Yeah.
I was able to be home to help my daughter continue to sort of practice driving towards getting her license. I was home to get my son to the end of season wrestling meets.
Yeah.
I was home and able to just be around and with my family, which is one of my greatest joys in life. So it's a choice.
Yeah.
And so instead of thinking about it as the fear of missing out, I think of it as the joy of missing out.
Love it.
Yeah, I could be getting benefit from SaaStr, but by saying no to SaaStr, I got to say yes to all those other things I just mentioned, and that is the joy of missing out.
That is great. I think you need to start doing the occasional Jomo post again. I haven't seen one in a while, but I love it. You know, that's great. In fact, what I noticed was not only your post, but the reaction to it. You got a lot of reaction, which means we all feel FOMO, or most of us, and just kind of flipping the way we think about that is really, really helpful.
Yeah, thank you. I have, the reaction's been great, but I occasionally get some people say, I wish I could do that. Or that will say, well, you've got privilege to be able to do that. Like, that's possible. But everything I have in my life is a choice.
Yeah.
You know, the bills I have are a choice.
Yeah.
The things I've committed to are a choice. I could choose to not do some of those things if just hanging out with my kids is more important.
Yeah.
We don't have to have some of the frills and benefits in our life. So it's a choice.
Yeah. I
and in
agree.
some cases, I know people that have simplified their lives, which puts less stress and strain on them from a work and an income standpoint, and they're happier than ever.
Yeah. Yeah. What are the one or two things that you've done or you found most helpful about sort of to have a sustainably flourishing life, in your life? What are some of the practices that really have helped you?
I think this may sound trite, but someone used it to me and it's helped me. Just health before wealth. Just take care of yourself. It's everything from eating right, drinking less, getting exercise, being active. That includes time away from screens.
Yeah.
I no longer read books on the Kindle. I know it's really efficient to have all these books on my little Kindle, but I really like
the old-fashioned
book.
physical book.
In part, I know it's like I got a book like I can't travel with because it's like this thick, right? But it's just ridiculous. But like I like reading an actual book. So I think just take care of yourself and make sure your health is a priority. It's taken me way too long in my life to really lean in on that. But I think it's really important. Well,
thank you. Thanks, Matt. Well, Matt, thank you for sharing your wisdom. Not just you dropped tons of wonderful insights about marketing, but also thank you for sharing. Just these the more personal side, how you balance work and life, and appreciate it greatly, Matt, and thank you for being on, and all the best to you.
You too. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks.